After nearly 4 weeks away, we are finally getting some F1 fantasy back in our lives with a Dutch Grand Prix race. But who should we bring in for the first race after the summer break? Let's find out. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of F1 Fantasy Pole Position. It is Thursday, August 22nd. My name is Ewan. And on today's episode, I'm going to be going over a Dutch Grand Prix race preview and then my final thoughts on team selection. If you have been tuning in all week, this is the fourth episode I've put out. We did a summer break recap. We did early team selection. We did green flag, yellow flag, red flag yesterday. And today is the race preview and the final team selection thoughts. But that won't be the last of the F1 fantasy content this week, as there will be a deadline live stream on Saturday, 2 p.m. Germany time, 1 p.m. UK, 8 a.m. USA. I've said that so many times this week. I should probably know that by now, but it always trips me up. So join me on Saturday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world to talk some F1 fantasy with all your conundrums, concerns, questions. We'll go all over the data for Friday's practices, all the simulations that come out. And yeah, just kind of talk some F1 fantasy. So join me there on Saturday. Hopefully you can make it, and like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and the podcast wherever you are watching or listening. I would greatly appreciate the support. Moving over here to the Grand Prix, we've got the Circuit Zandvoort, 4.259 kilometers, 72 laps, 14 corners, 2 DRS zones, and the first Grand Prix here was in 1952. Last year was wet and wild in the Netherlands, as a early splash of rain caused a record-breaking 200 plus overtakes. It was a field day for F1 fantasy points. I don't think, looking at the weather as of right now, we're going to get that much of a wacky Sunday race, but qualifying should be quite interesting. Over here on the compounds, the Pirelli have decided to go with the C1, C2, and C3 for this weekend. So C3 in qualifying, C1 and C2 are one of the mandatory race compounds during the race. So that will be kind of interesting to see who can get a handle on that at Zandvoort. If there's going to be a wet qualifying on Saturday, do you kind of give that up for a dry race on Sunday, or you just kind of take your chances and then hope that you can survive in the Netherlands with a high qualifying and potentially not as high of a overtake track in the dry? We will wait and see to kind of figure out who does what on Saturday afternoon. Weather here, like I was talking about, Friday is supposed to be 21 degrees Celsius, sun, clouds, apparently pretty windy. So we'll have to watch out for that as well. 70% chance of precipitation there. Saturday is going to be a little bit of sun, but a lot of rain, 84% chance of precipitation, 20 degrees Celsius. And then Sunday, 3% chance of precipitation as of right now, and just kind of sunny all day in the Netherlands and Zandvoort. So we will see if the forecast holds up. That is as of Thursday, August 22nd. So if you're watching this a little bit later, just know that weather forecasts change all the time. So yeah, hopefully this stays accurate and we can kind of get a mixed up weekend. That will be very entertaining for F1 fantasy purposes. Looking at the previous result from the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix, Alexander Albon qualified fourth here, finished eighth. So that is a strong result for the Williams driver. If you were watching green flag, yellow flag, red flag earlier this week, you will know that I am pretty high on Alexander Albon. I gave him a green flag. I had 4 other drivers, so you should definitely go check that episode out. And you would not have missed that if you had liked and subscribed to the podcast and the YouTube channel, which I would highly recommend. Max Verstappen went 1-1. Lando Norris second and then 7th. Does that sound familiar at all? Fernando Alonso 5th in qualifying, had a bunch of overtake points. I think he had 62 F1 fantasy points as a result of this race last season, finished second there. And Pierre Gasly, a surprising Alpine podium in third. The rest of the top 10 were Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, Alex Albon, Oscar Piastri, and Esteban Ocon. Moving over here to kind of some teams that we'll be looking towards for the Dutch Grand Prix. This is from F1 Fantasy Tools. This is their recency weighted average for a few price points here. So I got 126 million, 123 million, 120 million, and 117 million on the graphic here if you're listening on the audio side. Come check it out on the YouTube channel. Greatly appreciate that. At 126 million, according to F1 Fantasy Tools, you want to go Red Bull and McLaren as your constructors with Hamilton, Piastri, Hulkenberg, Bottas, and Sargent. That's 124.7 million, and that's projected to get 198 points just based on their recent results. The main reason that Mercedes is not in here is because George Russell does have a DNF and a disqualification in 2 of the last 3 races. So that greatly affects Mercedes kind of points per race total. I would expect if that was taken out that they would be there in Red Bull's spot along with McLaren. And then you could kind of boost up either your Hamilton or your Piastri spot to perhaps a Lando Norris at 123 million. It's the same kind of deal here. Red Bull, McLaren, Hamilton, Piastri, Bottas, Joe, and Sargent. And then 120 million, you're going to drop down from Red Bull to Ferrari. Then you keep Hamilton and Piastri, Hulkenberg, Bottas, and Sargent. And then if you're at 117 million, McLaren, Ferrari, Hamilton, Piastri, Bottas, Joe Guan Yu, and Sargent. That's 117 million on the dot, 182.5 predicted points. That is just based off of all the recent races. There is no data that has come out from Zandvoort, from the racetrack at all. The tires have not touched the track yet in F1. So this is just a little bit of a look ahead at what the teams could potentially be or what kind of assets are in good form as of right now. The main thing that I've kind of been harping on all week, if you've been watching my content, is this kind of conundrum that we're going to have amongst the kind of A and the kind of higher up B tier drivers. So on this graphic here, I've got points scored since Canada: Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, and George Russell, all with their different colors. As you can see here, George Russell kind of has a couple of unlucky weeks here with a -9 in Silverstone, -21 in Belgium. But other than those 2 kind of outlier results, George and all 5 of these guys have been really close. There hasn't been a ton of leaders every week. Like Lando finished top in Spain, then it was George, then it was Lewis, then it was Oscar, then it was Lewis again. So it's kind of been going with the race winners, obviously, but all these other drivers here, as you can see on the graph, haven't been that far away every single week. Like Verstappen at 38 in Spain, while Norris was up there almost I think he was in the 50-point range, 51 points there, not on the graphic there, but yeah. Russell 42, Piastri 40, or Russell with 43, Piastri with 42 that week in Austria. So there's not a lot that is kind of going wrong with either of these guys. I think these are the 5 drivers that you want to consider as kind of the main pack of your squad. So whatever budget you're kind of based in, I would highly advise trying to get at least 2 of these drivers. I don't think anyone can afford 3. I don't think anyone's budget is that good, especially if you want to go with one of the top 4 constructors. But these 5 drivers are kind of the main consideration for me as my top 2 drivers going along this week. I'm about to get into team selection. And while I'm thinking about that, if you don't have time to watch the entire episode, jump around in the timestamps below. I always put them in there. That way you can just click around and always just kind of get to whichever part of the video that you want to. But this is where the drivers are at since Canada. As you can see, everyone kind of goes up and down, but no one gets too far away from each other. So no one has been consistently great here. As you can see, Verstappen's line is probably the closest to a straight line that there is here, but not a lot of spikes there. 37, 38, 25, 29, 17, and 35 in the last 6 races. So hasn't really been spiking because each other driver here, like Lando's got 51, Russell has 43, Lewis 47, Oscar 46, Lewis again with 45. So Verstappen doesn't really have those highs. He's probably the most consistent driver, but he is getting outscored by a couple of drivers over the last 3 races, Oscar Piastri and Lewis Hamilton, but he's the most expensive asset in the game. So is he worth it? I don't think so. So I'm not really going towards Max Verstappen this week in the Netherlands. Next graph here is the constructors, kind of the same deal. Last 6 races, just kind of showing that while McLaren is probably the best option, I would say. Everyone should get McLaren in their squad by hook or by crook, whatever you need. Mercedes, though, they're my second choice, and I think that's a pretty popular opinion. I'm not gonna say that that's like a differential or whatever, but besides a -16 in Canada, Ferrari really haven't been that poor. 44 points in Spain, 69 in Austria, about 33, it looks like 33, 35 here in Great Britain, 47 in Hungary, and 47 in Belgium. So there haven't been too many weeks where Ferrari is like rock bottom, especially over the last 4 weeks. In Austria, it looks like they were second, then they were barely last in Silverstone, third in Hungary, and third again in Belgium. That does help when one of your competitors has drivers that are DNFing or getting disqualified, obviously. So Mercedes would be a little bit further ahead than Ferrari. But with Monza coming up next weekend, because we are going to be bang smack in the middle of a doubleheader after the Zandvoort Grand Prix here, we're just going to go straight into Monza. And Ferrari traditionally have been pretty good here over the last 2 years, especially with the new regs. They've been pretty decent, and you know that they're going to want to show out in front of the home crowd. So I wouldn't just bury Ferrari just yet. I prefer going with the McLaren Mercedes route because it's also kind of easy to maybe get to Ferrari. Like you could just drop down from McLaren to Ferrari next week if they look super good in the data in Friday's practice in Italy. But kind of talked about some previews, talked about some stats. Let's get into some team selection. So here's the team I'm dealing with after the Belgian Grand Prix here. I got Max Verstappen, Yuki Tsunoda, Logan Sargent, Zhou Guanyu, Nico Hulkenberg, Red Bull Racing, and McLaren. I don't feel particularly good about Red Bull or Max in my team. If there was anything I was going to do with just two transfers, I would go down from Red Bull to Mercedes. That would leave me with 6.8 in the bank here, which is useful, but can't really get me out of the Logan Sargent and the Zhou Guanyu business. And I'm just kind of swapping around CT drivers. Like one bad result, like I can go Zhou Guanyu up to a Kevin Magnussen. But if we're looking at like a Haas DNF, then that's just transferring them out for no reason. The only upside to this is it does give me exposure to three of the top four teams. I got Mercedes and McLaren as my constructor and Max as the Red Bull asset, kind of the best Red Bull asset, possibly the only Red Bull asset that you may want to own heading into Zandvoort. However, I'm pretty strongly feeling the case for a wild card for my team right now. So let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are heading into the Dutch Grand Prix. But as of right now, I'm thinking the wild card. I've used two of my chips so far. I've used the Limitless in China and I used the No Negative in Australia, which did work out because I think I had Max Verstappen for that. And so saved myself about 20 points. But I know there's been better uses of it so far this season. But I think I'm going to use my third of 6 chips this week. And if you listen to Green Flag, Yellow Flag, Red Flag, you would know that I'm pretty big on an Oscar and George build here. That leaves me with 26.2 million in the bank. I can get Nico again. I can get Alex Albon here and Valtteri Bottas. And while that doesn't get me all the way out of kind of the Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent business, it just kind of promotes me up to Valtteri Bottas, which is not as good. I think Bottas has the most upside out of those three. And then I would say Albon has the most upside out of those four, especially with, I have this hunch that Williams are going to be pretty good in the second half of the season. Sounds like they're going to bring some upgrades, really make a push to have a improved car with some momentum for 2025 when they welcome Carlos Sainz into the team. So I don't love having two of the four kind of lowest drivers in the squad, but this top two pairing, Oscar Piastri, George Russell with Mercedes and McLaren, I think this can more than cover off like Lando having a great weekend, Lewis having a great weekend, and the budget building upside that I have here at 119.5 million. I really need to start kind of getting my budget up if I want enough money to really utilize my extra DRS boost at some point in the future and one of these sprint weekend races that we've come up in a few races time. So Oscar is 1.4 million away from the tier A asset. George is 4.3. So he is the main asset for me to kind of get. I really want George back in my team. I know he's had some bad luck in 2 of the last 3 races, but I'm buying the bounce back narrative. I believe that luck is about to be on his side. I was fortunate enough to miss that bad luck in Belgium, but hopefully if you have George Russell, you'll ride the wave and just know that good things are coming because it can't all be DNFs and disqualifications. Famous last words, I guess. We'll see what happens this week. But this is my 119.5 million squad. I'm going to talk about 126.5 million just here in a second, but this is kind of where I'm at with my thoughts. And yeah, I think the wild card is going to be it for me at the Dutch Grand Prix. And here's the 126.5 million squad, the T3 squad, the squad that's in the top 500 in the world, while my T1 team is just outside the top 6K. So, yeah, I guess good job by this team for doing what they're doing. Max Verstappen, Nico Hulkenberg, Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, Alexander Albon with Red Bull and McLaren here. 2 transfers here. Like I was saying, there's not a ton that I want to do with this squad just with 2 transfers. Just depending on the data, like maybe if I don't want to activate my wild card, I'm kind of feeling that way here as well. But I think it would only be for -10, while as on my other team, it would save me like about 30 or 40 points there if I'm doing the math correctly there. So if I do this here, I can keep Red Bull and McLaren. I can go down to an Oscar if I want. And then I've got Yuki here, who is at, I think he was at 10.5, 10.9. Allows me with 20 million. So that's just a little bit shy of getting to George Russell, zero point 0.7 short of getting to George Russell specifically. So not ideal. That would be kind of my 2 transfer plan. However, if I want to maybe spend a little bit more money and get like Lando, if Lando's kind of crushing it in the data, that leaves me with 17.3. Also, not really super ideal. I could take a -10 and I'd get in Logan, and then I'd have 12.3 left, and then I could get up to from a Nico Hulkenberg. I'm pretty bad at doing math on the fly here. I've noticed that on the episodes here. That would get me up to George Russell. That would be a -10. It would also give me, like I was talking about, exposure to 3 of the 4 best teams, maybe 3 of the 3 best teams, if we're being honest here. Lando, George, Red Bull, and McLaren. Don't love just relying on Sergio Perez to kind of get me points there, but this is an option that I am considering for 3 transfers. If I want to save the 10 and get out of the Logan Sargent business altogether, I can also go to Mercedes, get me some Lando, George, and Logan. I think I can get all the way out of even the Williams business here, actually. If you just give me a second, if I can sort this by values here, like I could get a Nico Hulkenberg and a Esteban Ocon, and that gets me totally out of the Williams business and the Sauber business, which is feels pretty good. That would give me a lot of options here, kind of a good budget to build on, hopefully a strong base for the rest of the second half. It would be using the wild card a little bit more effectively as well. It'd be saving me like a few points here. But yeah, Lando and George is not bad either. I could also do like Lewis and then get myself a little bit more money as well. But that'd be triple McLaren or triple Mercedes, which seems like a lot, but the W15 has been flying in recent weeks. And then another 2.2 million I could get out of the double Alpine business and into the double Haas business, which I feel a lot better about. So there is some potential here. This wildcard template over here, because it has a lot like 7 million more in budget, is a little bit easier to kind of navigate. And it like almost has more options. So it's harder to decide what to do with it. Whereas my 119.5 team, I'm just like, I got to get Oscar, George, Mercedes, and McLaren in, and we'll just fill in the rest however best we can. But this is where I'm at with my 126.5 million team. Let me know in the comments below what your budget is, what your transfer thoughts are heading into the Dutch Grand Prix, and then we can talk it out in the comments, or you can join me on the live stream. One last reminder for the lineup lock for the Dutch Grand Prix. That's going to be at 3 p.m. local time, 2 p.m. UK time, and 9 a.m. Eastern. And that means that you get one last reminder this week for probably about the 8th time. You're probably sick of me saying it, but deadline live stream 1 hour before lineup lock. I will be here tearing my hair out about my wild card decisions. What am I going to do? What am I not going to do? What does the data say? And then I will be answering all of your questions. Any question you ask me, I will answer it. I guarantee. You can also hit me up on X at F1U and FPL, where I'm happy to talk F1 fantasy. I'm also happy to talk FPL if you want. If you're a little bit intrigued by Fantasy Premier League, you can hit me up on there as well with all my rotoballer.com writing. And also, I have another side YouTube channel. It's FPL Hall or Nothing. That's where I kind of do my FPL video content as well. So if you like what you see on the F1 fantasy side, maybe you can check out the FPL side. I finished top 5K in the world, which is better than what I did in F1 fantasy last year, but hoping to rectify that in the 2024 season. But that is it. That is the wrap on the 4th episode of this week. And there is a live stream still to come. Like I said, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Any support is always appreciated. Just give it a like or like the video, leave me a comment, whatever. It always helps out. And I'm happy to answer any question at all, whether it's just F1 fantasy, FPL, or just whatever we're talking about, thinking about in general. But I will see you on Saturday. And yeah, once again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I will talk to you next time.